Okay, I got it all set up. So-
Good evening, everyone who's just joining. We are just letting everyone in from the waiting room. We'll probably wait another minute or so before we get started. So I appreciate you all joining us tonight. Thank you.
After the documentary clip, talk a little bit more about that, and also to talk about his recent efforts at cultural restoration and work towards food sovereignty at the Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. So I hope you can all see my screen, and I'll kind of kick into the presentation here then. I wanted to start with just a little bit of orientation as to Ringwood's location. It's located here right on the border between New Jersey and New York State. And I imagine that this audience probably already knows what a Superfund site is. So I imagine I don't need to show this definition, but it's been really remarkable to notice that so many people don't even know what that term means, especially in New Jersey, when we have such incredible density of those sites. And typically, when we think of Superfund sites, if we know what they are, representations and visualizations like this usually come to mind. And so one of the things that we wanted to really tackle in this project is to offer alternatives on how Superfund sites are represented. And it's usually in things like, this graphic that you see here, which shows a map of the Superfund site at Ringwood. It shows the location where chemicals were dumped. It shows the locations where they're doing the cleanup. And then there's a remediation calendar that describes the years and dates when these contaminants were removed. And all of this information is incredibly important. I mean, this is a page from the Our Land, Our Stories book, so we definitely include this information. But it's also important to represent these other very significant layers that compose Superfund sites. So these sites are more than just places where chemicals were dumped. I mean, this place is home. It has cultural meaning, it has social meaning. There's all kinds of connections to the landscape. It's a place of spiritual connection. So we really wanted to show all these aspects in the project. And let me also start by just orienting you on how this collaboration started. So in 2018, I taught a studio in the Department of Landscape Architecture, and it's what we call praxis studios, a special topic studio. And I'm really interested in, and a lot of my research outside of this project looks at memorials and commemoration of contested histories. So I wanted to create a studio where students would design memorials that marked environmental losses. And I heard about the Superfund site at Ringwood. I reached out to Chief Mann, and he so generously agreed to share his time to come into the studio like you see here. And we also visited Ringwood, and we met with other members of the Turtle Clan. But there's only so much you can do in a design studio. So we wanted to sort of take that work further. This is just an image or a page that was in that original syllabus for that design studio. And I think that this is maybe a useful way of looking through the very complex and contested history of this place. It is the ancestral home of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation, the longest residents of this land that we reside on. It also was a place with a lot of iron deposits. So there was a lot of iron mining that took place there through the mid 1900s. And around that time, Ford Motor Company opened up what was at that time the largest plant in the nation in the nearby town of Mahwah. And many Ramapough who had worked in the iron mines went on to work for Ford Motors. And so it provided a lot of employment. The other side of it was that a lot of paint sludge contamination that was produced through the production of cars was dumped in the mines and in the forests around Ringwood and in the residential community that the Turtle Clan live on. So it came to the attention of the EPA, and it was put on the Superfund site in the 1980s. They did a really surface cleanup. They claimed that the contaminants were all cleaned up, but they weren't. And that came to light through a lot of advocacy work by the Ramapough. And very unusually, for the first time in history, the site was relisted in 2006, and it went back on the national priorities list. And in addition to the contamination and the environmental justice issues, This is a community that has faced many challenges, including people doubting their Native ancestry. So one example of this is Trump in the 1990s had this big media campaign to call into question their Native American heritage because he didn't want competition for his casinos in Atlantic City. And, as we all know, Native Americans continue to face serious issues when it comes to land and land rights on their own lands. We did this work in the design studio, but like I said, there's only so much you can do. A semester is only 4 months long. This story is so deep and so significant. So we realized that the project had to go further than the studio. So I got some funding from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, and then also from our New Jersey State Landscape Architecture Association. And then we later on developed a partnership with the Humanities Action Lab, which is based at Rutgers, Newark. And we had the opportunity to become a part of their Climates of Inequality exhibit that's traveling nationally. So with this funding that we got after the studio concluded, we used that. I worked with a number of research assistants, several of whom were former students who were in that studio. And we worked to create the Our Land, Our Stories book. It's a 100-page book. We really wanted to have this other vehicle for sharing the story, for spreading the story. It's designed for use as teaching material in classrooms. It's not really designed as an academic book. And it's used in a few classes at Rutgers. I, of course, use it in my own classes, but even outside of that, it's been used in environmental justice course and in a history course. It's been used in some high schools in New Jersey. And we, of course, shared it with the Turtle Clan as well. And I want to be really clear here to say that, this is not the first time that this story's been told. There was a major HBO documentary, Man versus Ford, which is still on their streaming platform if you want to watch it. And then a really important piece of investigative journalism, the Toxic Legacy series created by The Record in Bergen County in North Jersey. So this story has been told, but the goal here was to really move beyond these narratives of damage, which you see sort of presented in these kinds of images over here. And we wanted to expand that to really show all of these other layers that compose Superfund sites. So what you see in this image are different chapters in the book. So we, of course, describe the contamination. It's a very significant part of the story, but we really wanted to cover all these other areas and all these other aspects as well. And so the book and the material that you find in these chapters really rely, in addition to text and explanation and data drawn from scientific studies and environmental remediation reports, they really rely on a lot of graphic material. So we wanted to really experiment with different kinds of visualization to show that kind of information clearly, which we then translated to a larger format with an exhibit. You see some images here. So the goal here is really to communicate the impact of environmental justice issues on this community, which requires that we needed to present information that goes beyond the so-called objective data sets, which opens up, I guess, a broader epistemological question for researchers as we have to reconsider what kind of knowledge and data to include. This really involves taking community knowledge seriously, and that's knowledge that's drawn from the lived experiences of people who've responded to this environmental crisis. And also in thinking through how to present this, it's really important to consider how this kind of information is represented and communicated. Community level knowledge is especially difficult to represent solely in graphs and charts, like that very first page that I showed you. So we really draw on representational strategies from landscape architecture and from the environmental humanities for thinking through new forms and mechanisms for presenting information and for raising this awareness. So the materials include things like historical and archival images, photography, and then there's creative drawing and mapping work that we use to attempt to really illustrate the connections between environmental systems, culture, and identity. And so our hope is that by visually representing these traditions and cultural meanings and emotions, that this project can help people to develop understandings of the deeper connections to the landscape. So everything, we tried to make everything really aesthetically pleasing and visually engaging, in contrast to the manner in which a lot of scientific data is usually presented to audiences. And we had this really great opportunity to be included in the Humanity Action Lab's 2019 Climates of Inequality exhibition, which is meant to travel and to be shown in 22 different locations. I think everything was kind of on pause for a little while for COVID, but it's getting moving again, and it's coming to New Brunswick this fall. And so Ringwood, you see kind of the inclusion of the Ringwood story as part of that larger exhibit. And then the story is also included on their website. So along with the exhibit, we also held some events. So we had this opening event at the Newark Public Library in October of 2019. This event included panel discussions with speakers. So in the middle column here, you see Vivian Milligan. She's a community elder, community historian. You see in this other column, Chuck Stead, who's in environmental studies at Ramapough College. Top right is Jan Berry. He was the reporter from The Record who really was the lead on that toxic legacy story. We wanted to make the event and the materials also be very interactive. So at the opening, we asked people to write on this panel and to share their stories of environmental loss or environmental connection. So this is now part, kind of a permanent part, I guess, of the exhibit as it goes to other places, which it's now gonna be able to start doing again. At the opening, we asked people to share their stories, and these really brilliant sketch artists who are students or who were students in our department captured images while they were talking and while they were speaking. So that kind of marked the first phase of this project. We got the book out, we did the exhibit, and this process really made me think about a lot of questions. So I've listed some of them here. I mean, mostly really made me think about the role of the university in working with communities. As I was hearing, really hearing time and time again, especially at the Humanities Action Lab exhibit, as part of that, they had a national convening where they brought together people from all these environmental justice communities all over the nation. And, I kept hearing over and over again about how the university's work with communities can be extractive. So just kind of reflected on these questions of like, who gets heard, who gets credit for the work that's done? How do we sort of document what we learn? How do we share it? How do we disseminate that? So it's one of these questions I've just been trying to give a lot of thought and to really learn from the mistakes that we made or that I made in the first phase of the project, and to really begin to think about how we can open up, as members of a university, how we can open up to other ways that we can operate and do work with communities and deal with environmental justice issues. So in this last part of the talk here, I want to show some of the new work that we're doing in, I guess, the second phase of the project here. This is all stuff that's in process, so you're going to see my notes on this as we get ready. We're just prepping to send this to print really soon. What you see here is the cover, the new cover. We're doing a second edition to the book and adding in new material. And here we really wanted to be sure to add more Ramapough voices to the volume and to feature their stories in their own words. The current version that's out right now of the book has a lot of me as the academic writing and explaining, and then we have essays from our different project partners, but we really wanted to bring in these other voices much more strongly in this edition. So we tried to do that with the sketches that we developed from the stories that were shared at the opening of the exhibit. So here is how we've kind of tried to do that. This is Vivian Milligan's story. So she's, again, a community elder, community historian. She really pushed, advocated from the very beginning for this cleanup, for the remediation of the land to take place. And we wanted to really share her feelings about the landscape and about home. So the sketches here, we took those sketches and we changed them around and made some additions in Photoshop and InDesign. And then we brought in text from the story that she had shared and included like what she loves about her community and her home and the place that she's always lived, the really long time that she's lived there and that she wants to stay there, you know, to again say that this place is much more than this contaminated landscape. It's a place of deep and meaningful connection. We also have a story shared by Wayne Mann, another community leader involved from the very beginning, pushing for the cleanup. He also was the main protagonist, is that the right word? The person named in the court case, Mann versus Ford. I don't think that's the right word, but I think you know what I mean. He was also featured in that HBO documentary that I showed you earlier. And he describes his experiences growing up in Ringwood. Also talks a lot about how the Ramapough were received and perceived and continue to be perceived, the racism that they have long experienced in Ringwood, which absolutely plays a role in this story and in their struggles to get their lands remediated. He also described how he first became how he first came to work for environmental justice, how he went to a meeting by the Ringwood Neighborhood Action Association and began to learn about the chemicals and the toxicants and all the legal issues. And then also about how this landscape that he perceived as a really magical place from childhood with these rainbow colored streams that the children would play in, the growing understanding of what that meant, the contamination and the impact that that had on his community. And we also share some stories from Chuck Stead. He's in environmental studies at Ramapough College. He grew up in nearby Hillburn, New York, which is another Ford dumping site. He's been a really long time friend and ally to Ramapough. He led the cleanup of the Ford dumping and contamination in Hillburn. And he's also a storyteller. So here we outline some of the traditional Lenape stories that he shares, like the story of Sky Woman falling and then planting seeds on Turtle Island, and other stories like the dragonfly stories. And then finally, we wanted to contextualize this case, the story of Ringwood, which is not isolated. And we wanted to really contextualize it with the larger struggles that Native Americans face on their lands and the very proactive work they do. You know, they're not just being passive about these conditions that they've inherited, but all the really important environmental justice work that they do. And then also the context of the environmental deregulations of the past few years that affects the landscape that we all share. We wanted to add all these new pieces into the second edition of the book. And then the other piece that we're working on is this documentary film. It's called The Meaning of the Seed. It's about 30 minutes in length. And it originally started because we couldn't do the Humanities Council event we planned to do, which is a public event because of COVID. So we decided instead to film a talking circle of Ramapough elders and their relations and allies. And we filmed this in September of 2020 at the Muncie Three Sisters Farm. So here you see some images of the shooting and then the editing work that we've been doing over the last few months. We filmed it on the Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm, which is located in Sussex County. So it's a little bit outside of Ringwood. And this farm, I believe, started last spring. I want to say May of 2020. And Chief Vincent Mann and Michaeline Picaro have just been able to achieve so much in this short span of time. They've managed to turn this large 9-acre site into a productive landscape, and also really laying the groundwork to establish this site as a very integral part and component of a larger cultural restoration program and main part of the efforts to work towards food sovereignty. So please follow the progress on our Facebook and our Instagram pages. We're getting close to finishing the first version. I think we're going to be done by the end of April. So if anyone is interested and wants to organize a watch party, please email me or contact us through our page. We should have the full film ready to show to you soon. Today, I'm just going to show you a little sneak peek of the documentary. I want to just talk a little bit about how we've structured it. We almost try to lay it out like layers of the landscape, which you can read here from bottom to top. And in soil, which is the first part of the film, we talk about the roots of the problem at Ringwood. In seed, we describe the people, how they've adjusted and adapted. In garden, we talk about the recently inaugurated farm and those efforts for food sovereignty and cultural restoration. And then the last section of the film, Sunlight, is really kind of conceived of as a call to action for our younger generations to become involved and to work for environmental justice in their own communities. So the film sort of builds soil, seed, garden, and sunlight. So I'm gonna show you an 11-minute segment from the film. It's really rough, but I hope you can get the idea of what we're aiming for. I want to show you the first 11 minutes because that's the portion where we managed to get the audio mostly kind of cleaned up and mastered and have all the levels the same, but you might still need to turn your volume up and down as it plays. So I apologize for that. I'm gonna stop this and then just open up and share the clip on YouTube here. Let's get it all queued up. And yeah, somebody please let me know if you can't see or you can't hear this as it plays.
Aki miskweni biwabo. Hiya, 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 hey. Hiya, 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 ho. Ni biwabo handaya. Aki miskweni biwabo. Hiya, 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 hey. Hiya, 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 ho. Ni biwabo handaya. Aki miskweni biwabo. Hiya, 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 hey. Hiya, 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 ho.
People from the outside, many really still don't know the story. Many towns they've never heard of Ringwood because we were written off and the story was going to be buried so deep that no one 1,000 years from now would never have known. And again, we have to start the motion again, have to start rolling all over again. Collecting more people, educating more people.
It's always a struggle to show our people, you know, the red road and to follow a cultural way, because for our core community in Ringwood, that's been stripped away. You know, we've lost that from the loss of our elders. Looked around one day and there was no elders, there was no old people. And I remember when I was little that there was old people and there was older people. And those older people are what we lost first.
I went to a powwow for the Ramapough and I met Chief Mann and I met some of the elders. And they said, you know, you guys are up there in environmental medicine. What can you do to help us? We live on a Superfund site. Our children are growing up with contamination nearby. Our adults are sick. Our lifespan is reduced. What can you do to help? Can you do something? We found out that they had a lot of environmental issues and that they had an increase in some diseases above what's natural. Lots of diabetes, lots of cardiovascular disease, lots of bronchitis, lots of hypertension. They wanted to know if their land was contaminated. So we moved on with the help of Dennis DeFries and as a citizen scientist and many other Turtle Clan members who acted as citizen scientists with us and our graduate students and went out and they collected air and they collected soil, fish samples to see whether the ponds that they were fishing in, the fish were contaminated because then they eat it. We checked the plants to see what was growing in the area because plants can concentrate chemicals and especially metals. And so we're in the process of testing that. But what we did test and what we did analyze is the soil around their local church. And the soil around their local church came up in some places with higher lead and higher arsenic. And then we tested the water inside their local church and found that there were chemicals there as well. And there was elevated lead. It's important to know that more than 70% of all Native Americans throughout the country live 3 miles or less from a wasteland or from a Superfund site. It's incredible that these peoples who started this country, who were here originally, are the ones now who have to bear the inequitable burden of living near chemicals that can harm them, can injure them, and can kill them.
It was never anything else that beat us. It was poison that beat us. There was nothing else. Nothing else was going to beat us because of our way of life, because of our teachings from the past. We were going to be the future. But something came after us from Ford Motor that we couldn't beat, and that was poison. They didn't do it in the night. They didn't do it in the night. They did it in the daytime. So right up to our POTUS. They're all just as guilty. Ford owns them all, but we can't never give up. We can't never give up until the last one of us standing. And a unity that we've started to, over the decades, acquire from centuries ago, it's coming back in the circle.
Is it the beginning of the pollution to the Lunaape Reservoir? Is it the end? Is it midway? Not even the state and federal government really want to deal with this. My guess is because maybe of the magnitude of what the state government, the federal government, the governor's office, the senators, the president's office. I'm sure they're all aware of the possible, probable disaster that started over 50 some years ago. And it was sort of a little shocker that when they were reading it on the news that Ringwood wasn't mentioned, given that it's the only Superfund site ever to be delisted and relisted. And there was no mention. And again, I think it was part of a design, not a mistake, because I think Ringwood it's more than a hot potato, it's a poison potato. And then when they found the 1,4-dioxane, which also it's documents on state and federal documents, that the numbers were so high up in the Peters Mine area that it was unbelievable. Years later, you would get it in a Ringwood State Park where thousands of people had fished over the years, thousands of children have fished over the years. Then in a Lunaape Reservoir, you find it 8 miles downstream. And basically the EPA is saying, well, somebody probably took a bottle of shampoo up in the area and dumped it in the water, and that's what happened. This is what one of the top EPA people, the statement he made in a meeting that we were at. So again, I think the governor and should be ashamed of South in his office, and the Highlands Council should be ashamed because it is in the Highlands region, and we weren't left out by mistake. It was by design, because we're never going to get to the bottom of the poison, because all government agencies aren't going to allow that, because Ford Motor still calls the shots. Unfortunately, we will still continue to fight. We'll still continue to battle. But we need those even way above us to step up and stand their grounds and hold Ford Motor accountable. We can all agree, you can't save us. We can agree. But you can save the children of the future. You know, you can save the children downstream. You know, you can save unborn children that will be born into drinking poisoned water or a poisoned environment. But until more and more towns, more and more places begin to say, you know what, we're part of it, they're our neighbors, or start figuring out maybe it wasn't just them poison, you know, and getting after the government, holding them accountable for their failure. And someone should be going after the governor and asking the question of, you wrote this, but how is Ringwood not in it? How is Ringwood not a part of it? You know, it needs to be called out on this, you know, and, you know, some of our Congress people need to be called out on it. While they're, you know, having a good day talking on the news, they're all shaking hands and hugging and everything. And the people most affected back up in the area, there's no mention.
But if we don't respect nature, nature's not going to respect us. And let's face it, that's what's happening here, is that nature's kicking back, saying, you know, this is crazy. We don't, this is insanity. So, as I say, I don't know what the answer is to this. All we can do really is to try to spread the word, is to keep educating people, let more and more people realize. And let's face it, there's a lot of people out there that don't even know that their water is poisoned as much as your water is poisoned, and it's spreading. And this is the kind of education I think we need to be using, is letting people know you're in danger. You know, not just this little group of people, you're in danger. And that's the only way I think we're going to get any kind of responses, really.
Okay, that's the end of the clip there. I really wish I could show you the other sections. There's so much good stuff in the garden section, and Chief Mann explains like how the three sisters are growing at the farm. And you could also meet Chuck Stead and Kala Ligon, who also participated in the talking circle, who you haven't seen yet. But I'll close it there. And Chief Mann, I'll turn it over to you if you wanted to comment more on the farm or about the EJ legislation, anything else you wanted to share.
Thank you. Anishi ki shallow moquin. Alamili and Yong Kwai Kish Creek, wa Coconut Aki, wa Tinda, wa Kumbi, wa Kilongo Mati, wa Nimbo Mouse Wakam. Anishik, 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 Anishik. Thank you, Creator, for giving us this day, our Mother Earth, the fire and the water. We thank you for all of our relations, and most importantly, we thank you for our lives. In regards to the new legislation that was passed, you know, by the state of New Jersey, touted as, you know, this unbelievable, powerful environmental justice law that's still being crafted, by the way. My feelings on that, I was enraged. Anybody knows Chief Mann, they know that Chief Mann is laid back, caring, loving human being who admittedly so, is infatuated with his people, with his family, with his tribe, with all indigenous people, and with all our relatives. That's includes the animals that live in the forest, the fish that swim, the water, even to the trees and the inanimate, the stone. This EJ bill law, I guess, one would think that it would be, complete fanfare, that the Ramapoughs would be jumping up and down, raising our feathers in the air, saying, hey, finally, justice is going to come after 56 years, 4 years longer than I've been alive. And as I begin to join those sessions that they have when they're trying to figure out what to write in the law, a lot of questions came up, and some of those questions that were asked it was really disheartening. They put this law into play, and if you have something that is going to be an environmental injustice to an environmental injustice community, or a community that's underprivileged, or something like that, we all believe that that was going to stop any additional threats to our way of living and our lives and our future for ourselves and our kids. And we've all been duped. We all been misled to think that that's actually true, because the reality of that, through listening to these sessions, was that if they deem these polluters to come in, there's a benefit to them. Somehow that benefit outweighs you. It it outweighs the ironbound. It outweighs the people in Ringwood. And so, on face value, it's a beautiful thing. In reality, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't let your guard down, because it's not like we are the ones who created that law and that we could enforce it, right? Make it happen. Because if it was going to be enforced and it was going to be enacted, then they wouldn't allow a recycling center to go into our community again. Push all the toxic waste to the middle and put a earthing cap on it and build a recycling center on it. It doesn't do anything for, you might not be able to go up there to the paint sludge and lick it, but if you're over at Sally's Pond, chances are you're going to get a condensed level of toxic waste that's going to be down there. There's not even a sign that says don't fish, don't eat the fish. But we know for a fact through our work with NYU, Ms. Judy Zelikoff, that the fish are tainted, that the water is tainted. And so, the EJ bill, it's not for me. They didn't highlight the Ramapough, our struggle, 56 years. That's pretty sad, beyond sad, actually. It's a grave injustice, starting off with our ancestors, right? Because we are, and we believe that we are our ancestors' prayers. So when our ancestors 300, 400 years ago put down those prayers, we would be here one day. They didn't anticipate that our lives would still be threatened every day, that our children would still be threatened every day, that we would forget what justice was. And so my feelings about that is, this is an election year, and I'm sure we'll be seeing some folks, they're going to come around and say, hey, look what I did for you. I'm going to remind them that I didn't see them at one of our people's funerals. Hundreds of funerals, hundreds. At one point, there was 7 funerals in a week, one every day. They didn't come to the 3-month-old baby's funeral. They didn't come to the 7-month-old twin's funeral. They didn't come to the 10-year-old's funeral. They didn't come to the 30-year-old's funeral. They didn't come to the mother's funeral, who left behind 3 kids, one being 1 year old. They didn't come to my aunt's funeral. Point is that you have to kind of make your own justice in the world. And Michaeline and I have taken it upon ourselves, you know, to create a brighter future. You know, the meaning of the seed is hope. The meaning of the seed is that inanimate, seemingly inanimate seed is actually full of life. Every woman that ever comes here from the spirit world will carry those seeds in them. Okay? One day, those seeds will be planted and they'll begin to grow and they'll crawl, right? And we as parents have to remember our humility to take care of them, nurture them, feed them, teach them, protect them, right? So that they grow into be these big, strong human beings, spirit, bright as the sun. Right? So the meaning of the seed for me is it is hope. There is none. And Michaeline and I last year took money that we didn't really have, and we created the Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm in hopes that we'd be able to grow 2 kinds of crops. One of them is vegetables, and the other one is hemp, so that we could then afford to bring health and justice to our people ourselves. Because of COVID, we switched up what we were doing, and we had a small garden. And then we hooked up with some mutual aid groups who helped us to provide over 100,000 pounds worth of food to our community in Ringwood and to others, so that we could lessen the chance of them being already compromised health-wise because of the Superfund site, give them an extra chance. We were successful. You know, well, I guess successful is not really a good word. We did lose a Ramapough mom, but we had houses that had 4 generations living in there that were health compromised already, living in a Superfund site, and all 4 generations be, you know, with COVID bad. But we made it, you know, good 9 months. And so Michaeline and I, we created this little farm, bunch of help from the outside world. And this year, I'm proud and honored to say, you know, we've had Ramapoughs here already. And one of the things that we did last year was that Michaeline and I, you know, we took about $2,400, which isn't a lot of money, but, you know, for us, it was and still is a lot of money. And we bought garlic. And some volunteers came and we shucked that garlic and we planted 20,000 seeds of hope. Turn my camera around. So as you can see, you know, there's garlic growing everywhere. 20,000 seeds of hope, which are going to turn into, you know, 400,000 seeds of hope. This is our farm. It was farmed by our ancestors. The Muncie Three Sisters Farm that we founded out of need to support our people, to give them a chance at life, a little better quality of life, you know, by eating you know, higher medicinal value food and whatnot, to take that extra burden off of them, where, you know, they can utilize that money for medical bills or stuff. So in the back over there to the right, it's going to be right there. There's going to be 500 sweet potato slips going in. That's a lot of sweet potatoes. And behind that's going to be eggplant. And behind that's going to be corn, or Muncie corn, sweet blue pulling corn. And then by the tree line to the left there is going to be a couple thousand lavender plants. This is our high tunnel. It's 100 foot long by 16 feet wide. We're going to be adding two more, one a 30 by 96 and another one a 28 by 105. This spot right here is going to be a 100-foot long bean tunnel. We're going to be growing, probably 7 or 8 different types of beans there. This field here is all going to be onions. We have about 40,000 onion seeds that we're going to plant. Walla Walla, some from Italy, bunch of different ones. And then over on this end, we got another 2,000 linear feet of beds here for onions as well. And then these mounds in front of me is about 2,000 linear feet of beds that are going to be all kinds of different squashes. And then in that area in the back where it's grass all along there, that's going to be 3 acres of hemp. We have right now 30 chickens producing organic eggs. We've got 4 turkeys, and we're having a new addition, which is two little pygmy pigs, and kind of a rescue operation. Happy to say, and we're just going to take a little walk over here. Hopefully, I got about another 5-7 minutes. So what you can see here, almost all of this is going to be market beds, 250 feet long, 250 foot wide, and there's going to be a bed every 30 inches with about a 18-inch or 2-foot walking space in between. Today, I made 3 medicine gardens, and those are going to be our 3 medicines: tobacco, our ancient tobacco, our sage, and our sweetgrass. And that medicine that we grow is very important to our people, very important to all Native people. We use them to pray with and smudge and cleanse. So you can see, this is one of those circles. It's beautiful. And then there's another one over there, another one over there. That's hope. Those are the prayers that we're going to be putting down, for our ancestors or our descendants who will yet come here. And right here, where these holes are, is going to be our arbor. It's going to be pretty big, about 24 foot long, about 16 foot wide, and it's going to be the 3 Sisters pavilion. And this right here is one of the mounds I started, which is going to be a big 3 Sisters mound. Around the cattail is going to be all wildflowers. Another 3 Sisters mound there. This is the walkway to the pavilion. And we actually did get some potatoes planted today, 3 rows, 200 feet long, 1 potato eye every foot. So that is 600 potato plants that we got in the ground. And yay for food sovereignty, right? Yay for food justice for those other communities that don't have, that we're going to take care of too. That's a beautiful thing. And lastly, I just want to take you inside here to the greenhouse. I want to show you what a seed of hope looks like. Really important when we think about our connection to all living things, all our relatives here. We need to create laws that actually do the work of protecting. So when we get down to the other side, I'm sorry because it's 100 foot more to go. But it's a beautiful place. This farm is created for healing, not just for vegetables, but to heal your spirit. It doesn't matter if you're a Ramapough. every human being out there has hurt that they carry, generational trauma. Some don't know it, but we all do. We all walk with pain, whether it's losing a loved one or being sick. So inside the tunnel, you can see I already started to cover up stuff, but we have about 7,000 seeds of hope. We got kale, right? Bunch of kale, purple peacock broccoli, Waltham broccoli. We got red cabbage, okay? Green cabbage. Oh, look at that. That's a whole lot of hope in there, right? That's what the meaning of it. Give that a little bit extra human being, so you can see all the way down. There's 2 rows up on top, about 80 feet long. And then there's about another 80 foot long going down that side. And even some here. So I'm gonna turn back. Oh, I'm gonna turn back around here, figure it out. So that's what the meaning of the seed is, right? It's about caring for everything. One of the things that always hit me is that when people wear sunglasses, right? You can never see their eyes. But there's mine. They're black. Got a lot of pain in there. But I believe in our prayers. I believe in the prayers of our ancestors that walk in a prayerful way. I believe in humanity more so than probably anybody. So at that, I just want to say thank you for providing me with this opportunity to share the story of our people. While acknowledging that we're not the only ones who suffer. But if we can find a way to justice, maybe we can begin to help our other relatives ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Mann. It was incredible to get to see the farm and to hear you speak about it. Oh, I'm a little bit speechless myself, just sort of thinking about how special it is to be able to be at the farm with you tonight, and to have heard Dr. Bakshi's account of some of the histories of contamination, but also to have to get to see and hear your narrative of resurgence too, which I think is really important, and your narrative of care and medicine and treatment, which seems so crucial too. So we have about a half hour for questions. I'm sure people may have them, may want to know more about the farm or about the history or about Dr. Bakshi's projects and collaboration. So please feel free to post your name in the chat if you'd like to ask a question, or to post your question directly into the chat if you'd like to speak. But maybe as people are sort of gathering their thoughts, I could start us off with one. I'm very interested in both of your work because I think it goes so far beyond sort of thinking about landscape. Dr. Bakshi, you're sort of moving beyond landscape architecture's traditional tools to do historical work and oral and public history and filmmaking and design and storytelling. And Chief Mann, your work is spanning political advocacy, farming, spiritual leadership, and citizen science. And I wonder if either of you would like to say something about sort of working in this multidisciplinary way, because it seems that it's really essential to be able to do that, to be able to deal with the environmental challenges that we are facing today, and also to create visions of hope and futurity as well.
Yeah,
First, you made me smile with all the seeds of hope, so I'm still soaking that in.
I do have something to say, you know. A few hundred years ago, um, when the colonizers, you know, people from Europe came here, um, there was something that they wanted, and it wasn't that at the beginning, right? In the beginning, of maybe a couple of skirmishes here and there, but we learned to utilize and live here in peace. And then as the years went on, more and more there was the voracious need for land at any cost, by any means. And what became the federal government here, even though we fought, you know, as rebels, you know, on the American side against the British, um, what they did was that they separated our community. That's how they figured how they could hold dominance and sway over it. And one of the things that I've learned, you know, walking this red road, is that for the last, you know, couple hundred years, since the United States has been such, um, governments of all levels, you know, have created a society of individuals. And not did they only try to do that to us, but they've done that to 300 plus million people in the United States. And so the only way in which to um, cure or fix this problem that we have is by, you know, the universities, you know, those ivory towers taking a chance and working with communities instead of working on communities. And you'll hear, unless it gets edited, that I say to my beautiful friend, um, Anita, Dr. Bakshi, um, you know, that I hacked her, right? And as a leader for the Turtle Clan, you know, it's my obligation and inherent responsibility to do whatever I have to do. That's to sacrifice myself, right? And to become the person who has to carry all that trust on myself while trying to protect, you know, our community from people that want to hurt us. And so I put all my faith and trust into Anita and into her class members. And so, you know, there has to be, you know, the universities need to be like they were back in the 70s, right? How they stood up against the Vietnam War, right? And human rights, civil rights. And universities got away from that because they are funded by these corporations and foundations who have, for the last 50 years, created the hell which we're all living in. And as soon as those universities begin to, you know, accept that money from them, they go like, oh, well, you have a conflict of interest, so I can't give this to you unless you don't do that. And we bore witness to this, right? They couldn't do this project that would have benefited our people, but they couldn't do it because, you know, they were getting money from these funders. And so I take every opportunity with Rutgers Newark, Rutgers New Brunswick, MSU, NYU, um, NJIT, Columbia University, you know, all of these schools. I am in there. As soon as they ask me to be there, I'm there. Why? So I can tell a story. I can gain knowledge. I don't have to be the professor, the scientist, the teacher, the, you know, politician. I don't have to be any of those things. All I have to do is speak from my heart. It reminds me, just, and then Anita can talk, but it reminds me of, you know, one of our teachings that the Creator gave us 2 ears to hear twice as good with, 2 nostrils to smell twice as good with, 2 eyes to see twice as good with. But the Creator only gave us 1 mouth. And so we need to utilize our heart to speak from that, you know, not speak from, you know, experience so much. Um, not experience, but not speak from a book, you know, tell people how you actually is the experience, right? Tell people the truth, right? Speak other people's words. They're not deniable, right? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Man. I wish I could, like I said before, I wish you could see the rest of the film. I hope you all watch it later because there's a very important segment in there where Chief Mann says, like he just said now, we've worked with universities, we've brought you into our world, we've made you see through our eyes. And I think that's happened really effectively in this project. And I just would also add, I'm sorry, Meredith, I actually forgot your original question, but just to bounce off what Chief Mann just said in terms of the work of the university, I feel like sometimes in the university, we're also bounded by our own objects that we're meant to produce, what we have to do to, keep our jobs, or for some people to like get tenure or get published or do things in these certain forms and formats. And that's usually not compatible with what a community might need from you. So I think that's a challenge we sort of all face internally, those of us in the university trying to work with communities.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Anita. Um, you know, but as far as record goes, I had the opportunity to have the last final words. Right? Everybody wants to have the last final words when it's really important. I had the opportunity to have the last words at Hacking the University. And I made it clear, to the president, rector, I said that, don't, if you're going to say something, this is what you're going to try to work towards, I'm going to hold you to it. Right. And that's the society that we live in. People shouldn't be scared of losing their job because, they see something and they know that's wrong. They need to take and remember their humility and, put it forward. That's our problem with the EPA. You hear my cousin Wayne Mann? Wayne talked about the government. Wayne talked about the EPA. They all know. Congress knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that this is one of the worst Superfund sites in the world. And it's just those Indians that are living there. And it's sad. But anyway, fire off some questions. I got an answer for everything.
Excellent. Those were both two brilliant answers. There's two related questions that maybe I'll read. In what ways can younger and current generations start to learn, raise awareness, and support Indigenous communities in Ringwood, in New Jersey, and throughout the country? And are there any initiatives to have land returned to the Ramapough Lunaape Turtle Clan?
There definitely is, but it's not without working. Right? It's not without sacrifice. When I say sacrifice, I mean sacrifice. Right? I don't know what a vacation is. My phone's on 24 hours a day. And so we are working currently with some conservancies in New Jersey to acquire lands that are they're protected right now. So we would have to continue to protect them, which is obviously that's what we've always done, right? Keep the balance out there. And so we look forward to that. We look forward to our people to be able to go on clean land, go to the places, those ceremonial stone structures that are out there that our ancestors placed, follow them, follow those trails, and so how people can be involved to help Native people is that you do have to go to the leaders, right? You do have to understand that this is our country here. This is our land. We're occupied. It's no different than Jerusalem and Palestine, right? It's the same thing here for us. Um, Eugenics was created here in the United States, and that wasn't just created here in the United States. It was actually founded on the Ramapough people. And in 1923, the most popular way out of 18 different ways to deal with the unwanted people of the Ramapough Mountains was by a public lethal gas chamber, right? And because of public outcry, it didn't happen, but sterilizations did. And what became known as the Holocaust was created right here in New Jersey on the Ramapough. We were threatened with that, And And so in order to, help indigenous people throughout this country, you have to go to their leadership and you have to say to them, is there anything that I could help you with? You know, not to come rushing in there with some grandiose idea that you're going to save the native people, right? We just need the voices. We just need the platforms. We just need the support. You got to see that. You got to see non-indigenous people coming from all over the world at Standing Rock. But then there were those ones that were there that, excuse my language, but they were shit starters, right? They were the ones that when the chief said, okay, this is done, we're done, right? When he said that, there was a video on YouTube of these two younger generation people who were there supporting it. But then when the chief, so they were giving this, you know, saying about the chief, and then they said, but we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We're going to stay right here. And so what did that do, right? That those two little people brought, rained hell down on Standing Rock because of them, right? Because they thought that they were still putting on, being resistant, So you have to go to the leadership. You got to come with a clean, pure heart, and you have to say, what can we do, to help you?
Thank you, Chief Mann. There are a couple of other questions. Heather Lewis asks, are there connections between Superfund sites in New York and New Jersey, which are on historic Lenape land?
All Superfund sites in New York and New Jersey are up Lenape land unless you get up to the Haudenosaunee.
Right.
Sad to say. As far as I know, though, the Turtle Clan of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation is one of the only ones living in a Superfund site, besides possibly Onondaga, but definitely Akwesasne, Mohawk. I've been up there. They had General Motors. The difference that they had up there is when they call us stakeholders, right? Here. But the difference between being a state recognized tribe and a federally recognized tribe is that when they call you a stakeholder and you're a federally recognized tribe, you literally are sitting at that table, like literally, right? If you knocked over your coffee, it would go on their lawyer. For us, their lawyer sat on the phone with me for an hour telling me every which way why I don't count. Why, even though I'm Native American, even though the federal government does recognize us for other purposes, outside of a government-to-government relationship, that I don't count, that our people don't count. So they call us stakeholders, and it's a miscarriage of justice because we're not stakeholders. I've even tried to get them to have a CAG meeting, a Citizens Advisory Group meeting in Newark. Hundreds of thousands of people live down that way, get their water from the Wanakee Reservoir. Shouldn't they be able to say that whether or not they think that's a good idea, you leave the toxic waste here so we can drink it? How come they don't have a voice? So, I'm reaching out in time that I don't have to connect with the Ironbound and others to try to change that, bring awareness. Our water problems in New Jersey are worse than Flint, Michigan, and nobody understands that. Flint, Michigan was definitely something that didn't need to happen, but it's only been going on for so many years, right? Not 56, and oh, I got lead in the water in Newark, but it's not coming from the pipes was the original thing that Barack said. And then it was, oh, we got to change the pipes out because the lead's coming from the pipes. Well, that's not the case. It's a matter of fact that in Michigan, it was when they switched to water and the chemicals that were in there is what began to leach the lead. So regardless if those chemicals are coming from our Superfund site or from Pompton Lakes, there's chemicals in that water that people shouldn't be drinking and have been for 56 years.
Yeah. That follows up on another question from Lionel Ponce. How have the Ramapough connected with other EJ groups in the state, like the Ironbound that you just mentioned, or the New Jersey EJA, especially in light of the lost promise of the New Jersey EJ law that you described?
Yeah, so we have. I mean, we've been on TV, we've been in the newspapers, we've been to Washington, D.C., we went to the congressional hearing, swearing in of Lisa Jackson, who oh, I've got the Ramapoughs back. You drag our people down there, parade them in front of cameras, like a dog and pony show. The fact of the matter is that when she was there, all she had to do was sign a piece of paper so we'd have a full remediation and a relocation. Yet she didn't do it. So, you know, um, we've gotten taken back a bit and we find ourselves pretty much by ourselves again. And then through our own work, started to reconnect to certain other groups. And, Thursday evening, we're going to have a rollout of something here in New Jersey. And I'm honored to say that I'm going to be a part of that, which means that all Ramapoughs are going to be a part of that, which means that all citizens in northern New Jersey that are within my reach will be a benefactor of that. And I look forward to that. So to say that that these organizations have reached out or we've reached out to them, I just want to say that we are sitting in a pool in a sinking boat, and no one's coming to rescue us. Not even the people who swore and took an oath, right? Senator Lautenberg, rest his spirit. Senator Lautenberg, he cared about the environment, but he really cared about the Ramapough, and somehow, through time, all of that original thinking was left behind. The corporations began to tell the EPA what they're going to do, because that really is how it is. Wayne Mann did not lie. Corporations, it's a policy that needs to be changed. Corporations should be forced to pay, but they in no way, shape, or form should be the ones who are hiring environmentalists to come and clean up and, to make this place safe for people. I mean, that right there is a conflict of interest the size of, Mars,
Thank you. It's really helpful. We have another question from Amanda Mumford. She says, Chief Mann, thank you for sharing. I'm working on a project that's looking at restoring forests and landscapes on Erie land using a framework of 7 generations. I would love your perspective of healing land for the next 7 generations.
Of healing land,
Healing land for the next 7 generations.
healing.
Yes, sorry, healing.
So when anybody works on, this is another reason why we created not just Muncie Three Sisters Farm, but Michaeline and I actually created a nonprofit that is Ramapough Culture and Land Foundation, which is about cultural restoration, language restoration. It is about preserving and protecting land, but it's also an avenue for us to be contracted, to go out on these projects where we can make sure that plants that are being and trees that are being restored to the wetlands, that they are those things that benefit our people, right? Because our people, in order to heal, need to go back out into the woods to gather those medicines and to gather those wild edibles, right? Get back to who we're not supposed to eat cows, you know. Um, so I mean, anybody that wants us to work alongside of them, hire us, or whatever, be a part of a grant, we're more than happy to be a part of that because we're doing it anyway. That's something else I wanted to make clear. We're not sitting back anymore. We're going to do what we have to do to save our people, to protect our land, and regardless if somebody's going to come or not, we have to do it. We had to do this farm, right? We had to create that nonprofit. We had to make these relationships with people who have good hearts, right?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Do we have any other questions? I think anyone can feel free to unmute themselves and ask if you'd like to.
Yeah, come on. Don't let me sit here doing nothing.
Oh, Joelle Donat says, this is great. I don't see a donation link on your website. Can one make a monthly donation to your foundation?
They can, if you go onto the website and go all the way to the bottom, it should be there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Or to the farm. If you go onto Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. Thank you, Anita. there's one on there as well.
Excellent. And then somebody else asks, is there a way to help with the labor on the farm?
There absolutely is. On Monkey Creek System Medicinal Farm website, you can go on there and have a volunteer, kind of like an app that's on there, and that usually things are put up for the weekend. But during the week, especially this week, we're here trying to get everything in place. We got seeds to continue to sow. We're going to have a massive plant sale, try to sell like 3,000 or 4,000 plants in end of May, and we'll get prepared for the winter time when our people don't have money, for that heat.
Excellent. It's really exciting. Well, I'm so grateful. I don't want to take more of your sunlight hours. I can see it fading behind you. I'm
Okay.
so
I've been here before when it's been no light. The tractor has lights on it. So.
a lot of time at the farm. Yeah, I'm actually in Massachusetts right now, and the sun is going down, so it's pretty
Oh
amazing
yeah,
to see.
it's probably lower there than it is here.
Yeah, it's quite different. I'm really grateful to both of you for sharing your insights with us tonight, for helping us think through how to move beyond images of damage, as you were saying, Dr. Bakshi, and co-create images of resurgence that nonetheless don't paper over difficult and painful histories. I think this is something that a lot of us who work in design and representational fields and in art making are thinking about. I also wanted to say to everyone here, we mentioned a little bit the group Project Third that Carlos Mota is coordinating in our art department, looking at ways that we can strengthen our relationships with Indigenous communities and Indigenous teachers. And so if you're interested in these questions specifically here at Pratt, I would recommend attending the Project Third events and getting involved. Been some really incredible conversations so far in that group. And I really want to thank Dr. Bakshi and Chief Mann and all of you for being here. Also thank Tessa Mafucci and Lionel Ponce for all the work they did to organize this, and Carolyn Schaefer for introducing and hosting as well. It's been terrific as a member of the School of Architecture to get to collaborate with the Pratt Sustainability Center in this way. And we do this a lot, but I hope it'll be the first of many more collaborations.
Can I just throw a couple words out?
Oh, please,
Um,
we'd love it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to also work on is that we'll be asked to collaborate on when parks, when parks are, whether they're lands that get preserved, that a conservancy is going to put in new paths, or a state or a county is going to do a new trail or something like that. We really want to elevate our role. And if anybody that's on this call has the ability to do that, we would really gratefully appreciate that, because when you're putting in trails, our ancestors didn't walk in a straight line, and to be able to create a trail, pathways that, or a space that is seen through, our Muncie eyes, in our spirit, what will come of that will be recognized by other Indigenous people, but it will also allow the community at large, to bear witness to that, um, and we also would then have the ability to direct that trail away from sacred areas as well, instead of disrupting them, and putting them in harm's way. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's really crucial. It's also really relevant for another project that I am involved with that I'd love to talk with you about offline, maybe.
It would be my honor.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thank you. Thanks to everyone who was here and for spending this time. Please be in touch, of course, with Chief Mann about that project and volunteer at the farm. I got to come out really soon and do that myself.
By the time you get here, it's going to be a forest.
I know. Well, we got to come back and film actually in the spring. But again, that's another conversation. To everybody on the call, if anyone's interested in, again, like scheduling a watch party for the Meaning of the Seed documentary when it's out, please be in touch. I shared earlier a link to the PDF for Our Land, Our Stories. I'll just copy it into the chat again. That's available. We've shared it with educators across the state. Would love it. If anyone wants to use this in their classrooms, please feel free and keep an eye out for the second edition coming soon. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you both here. Thank you so much. Really grateful for your time.
Truly is an honor. Stay blessed.
Thank you. You too.
The pitch canal. That means till we see each other again.